Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. If you've been following this YouTube channel for any amount of time, you may or may not know that I love a good thriller. One of my favorite tropes within the thriller genre is the isolated setting trope. I love a good book with an isolated setting where the characters are somehow by themselves, whether that's because of weather or their location or any other means. I love isolation in fiction. And it's been a minute since I've done a recommendations video, so I wanted to sit down and chat with y'all for a few minutes about a couple of isolated thriller recommendations that I have for y'all. I have 7 books that I want to touch upon, 5 adult thrillers and 2 young adult thrillers. All of these books I rated 4 stars or higher. I would recommend that you check out all of these, and they all primarily focus on this idea of isolation and somehow being alone with a couple other people, but overall being cut off from a lot of the world around them. We're just gonna go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to start off with the 2 young adult thrillers first. These are 2 books that I really enjoyed. I don't read a ton of young adult anymore, but when I do gravitate toward books in that age range, it is always very fun to find new favorites. So first up in this list, I have The Restless Dark by Erica Waters. This is a young adult serial killer podcast thriller about this group of people who are out in the woods in this big canyon trying to find the remains of this serial killer who is called the Cloud Kiss Killer, who was supposedly killed or who supposedly died somewhere in the area. And there is this podcast who is hosting a contest to get all of these true crime podcast fans into this place to help find some hint about the remains of this killer's body. So our main character we follow is Lucy in this book. She was actually almost one of the serial killer's victims. She did survive. She was supposed to be his last victim before he supposedly died. She goes to this canyon, to this place, to help be a part of this contest because she wants to know for sure that he is actually dead and cannot come back for her. We also follow 2 other characters, Carolina and Maggie, and you can't really trust any of them, but they end up kind of becoming woven together as they are trying to find answers. This book is full of characters that you cannot trust. There are a lot of very big unknowns in the plot and with the characters as well. And you have a very foggy and a very creepy atmosphere in this one, which makes it a very good isolated thriller. Next up is Under the Surface by Diana Urban. This one is a young adult catacomb thriller that takes place underneath the catacombs in Paris. There is a group of students in France for their senior trip, and a couple of them end up finding their way into the catacombs where it was supposed to be like an underground party, and they end up getting lost and trapped down there. And there's a very sinister cult that has made the catacombs one of their hideaways. If you love thrillers about cults, would recommend this one. Has all the cult vibes in it. You've also got that very trapped and isolated feeling as we are literally underground for a majority of this book. But as you are following this under the surface POV, you are also getting above the surface insight as well, because one of the characters who is not trapped, who is trying to find out where they went and what happened to them, he is in Paris still, and he is running around trying to figure out what could have happened to his friends and romantic interest who went missing. This is also a very slow book to start, but it is so worth it in the end. I had a great time with this one. Moving on into the 5 adult thrillers that I have for y'all. First up is Night of the Storm. This is a thriller that takes place in the middle of Hurricane Harvey, I believe, in Texas, and instead of evacuating like they are supposed to, our main character Gia, who is a single mother, takes her son and goes to her sister's mansion in another part of Texas, and they end up going there and staying there and getting stuck when the hurricane hits. But somebody ends up dying, and this becomes a locked room mystery. You're trapped by the elements of the storm. You can't contact the outside world. The outside world cannot contact you. And it's very dark, literally, because it takes place like in the darkness, in the night of this storm. But also, there's a lot that happens, a lot of secrets that unfold in this one. There were a couple of moments in this book where I had to suspend some of my disbelief, but upon doing so, I was very much able to fly through this book. I absolutely loved it and definitely had a good time reading it. It was a very bingeable book for me, especially as I love a good locked door mystery. You get that isolated sense while also the classic like a locked door whodunit type of situation going on, so I loved that combination in this book. We also have The Last Word by Taylor Adams. Now I would argue that a lot of his books are very isolated settings. You have No Exit and Hairpin Bridge that also have very isolated settings, but The Last Word is the author's most recent release. This is about a woman who is house sitting in this cabin in this very small cliffside town, and she's trying to escape whatever past she is running from. And in her spare time, sitting in this house all by herself with her dog, she reads a lot of books, and she ends up writing this review for a really bad horror book. She gives the book 1 star, writes a review, posts it online, and she suddenly starts getting all these messages, and then someone starts messing with her and trying to unalive her, and you very much get this chaotic plot from the very beginning of this book. It was absolutely wild. I was confused sometimes because there was just so much going on in this one, but this book is truly a chase from start to finish. But this woman is also trapped in her home, and she's trapped on this very small island with no way to contact people outside, and a serial killer maybe is after her, and she doesn't quite know why, and why it all stems from one bad review. And this book was crazy from start to finish, but in a good way. And I would recommend Taylor Adams' other thrillers as well if you want that very isolated, dark, atmospheric thriller where you're trapped by something, whether that is the weather in No Exit or this cliffside, small town, stormy setting in The Last Word. Next up we have The Clinic by Kate Quinn. This is about 2 characters. One woman finds out that her sister died in this very exclusive, very expensive rehabilitation center. She wants to go uncover the truth. I believe she's a journalist in this book, and she wants to go find out what really happened to her sister. As we follow this one woman's perspective, we also follow the perspective of somebody else who is involved at the clinic and doesn't quite know what's going on, but eventually realizes that she's been playing a role in the sinister things that happen there. This book has such an eerie and captivating setting. It takes place in the middle of nowhere in this clinic, in this rehab center, and once you go in, you don't always come back out. And I really loved that aloneness that came with this creepy setting because it made the book even darker, even more mysterious. This book also includes unlikable characters, which I personally am a big fan of in thrillers. I think that unlikable characters are made for the thriller genre, and I am not opposed to them in most of the books that I read if it's for a thriller and if it doesn't go too far. But in this book, I thought that it was the perfect balance of unlikability and unreliability in the characters, which made me enjoy the book even more. Next up, and this one may be a shock to a lot of people who've been on my channel and have maybe heard me talk about Frida McFadden, but I also have The Crash pulled up here. I just recently read this book, and I've got to admit it is my second favorite Frida McFadden book. I've read 7 or 8 of her books and have not liked 5 of them, like at all really. They've all been very average or below average for me. So I was very excited to read this one just about 2 weeks ago and really enjoyed it. This book is about a woman who is 8 months pregnant and goes to visit her brother when a snowstorm hits, and she ends up getting into a car accident and is kidnapped by this family who lives in the middle of nowhere, Maine. She is trapped by this snowstorm, cannot communicate with anybody outside of this house because her phone has gone missing, and she is stuck and she's kidnapped and she's kept in this basement. And I tend to have a problem with Frida McFadden's writing style and just being able to guess plot twists, but a lot of that's on me just from reading so many thrillers, I think. I did not guess the plot twist in this one at all, and the writing style was so easy and fun to engage with. I didn't find anything cringy about the dialogue or the descriptions and things like that like I have found in her other books, at least the ones that I have read. And I just really enjoyed being able to sit in this book and binge it super quickly and just like not even think about wanting to put the book down. It was so fun. I think a large part of the reason why I enjoyed it was because I wasn't able to guess anything that happened, because I didn't think too hard about the plot. I didn't think too hard about what was happening, and in the end that really made me enjoy it more. I just thought that this book was very well written and very fun, very bingeable, and definitely one of my favorite Frida McFadden books that I've picked up. I did upload a book review a year and a half ago almost now for Ward D by the author, which is my top favorite book by her. I would love to do a reread of that one soon, but if you love isolated thrillers, would also recommend checking out that one. Finally, and the only book that I own physically, I have The Chamber by Will Dean. This is also a very recent read for me. This book is isolated in the fact that it takes place under the ocean, hundreds of feet below the water at times, and it is about 6 deep sea divers who are on a saturation trip where they're going down to the bottom of the ocean to fix oil pipes and do construction and like just maintenance and things like that. Very standard dive for these 6 people, and one by one they all start dying and nobody can figure out what is happening, and they can't get out of the chamber that they're in because whatever happens before they go down, like all the levels of air and everything, the gas, everything pressurizes, and it takes days for them to get out of that pressurization, and if they get out early then they could also die. So they're trapped with dead bodies, and there's no understanding of what is going on and why these people, these perfectly healthy normal people, are dying in their sleep. This book was crazy. This was such a quick read. The chapters were super short. You follow one perspective the entire time, and the way that the story is told, there's so much that happens, but there's a very clinical element to how everything is shared. And so I never like felt this like super overwhelming like, oh my gosh, what is happening? But I was also like super engaged in what was going on. It's almost like I expected the things that happened to happen, but I wasn't able to figure out why it was happening and who was behind it and all of that stuff. So I read this book super quickly in the midst of finishing up my thesis, and while I don't quite understand the ending and how we got there from start to finish, this book was absolutely wild. I loved it. I still think about it all the time. Every time I walk by my copy of it, I'm just like, wow, that was really good. And it definitely makes me want to read more of Will Dean. I have read another book by the author and it was okay. I didn't love it, but this book was probably one of the best thrillers, just like the eeriest thriller that I've read in a very, very long time. And I loved the isolation of under the ocean because I never read that before, and I thought that that premise was very unique and very well told. I didn't quite understand a lot of the deep sea diving terminology, and some of the descriptions were kind of confusing, but there is a dictionary at the beginning of the book with some of those terms, like a little glossary, and there is a diagram, I think is the word, of what they're in, and like kind of just being able to see what all is happening, when it's happening, where it's happening, like underneath the boat, because the entire time they are either all in the chamber, the wet pot, which is the bathroom, or they're like in the bell for just a little bit of the book. So very cramped, very isolated setting, and it was a really fun time, and I would highly recommend checking The Chamber and all of these books that I mentioned out. These were very rapid recommendations for these 7 books, but they are all books that I really enjoyed and love sharing about with people. And I love a good isolated setting. I'm always looking for more thrillers that have those settings in them. These are just some that I have read and really enjoyed. If you've read any books, any thrillers that have isolated settings, feel free to comment down below and let me know. Again, I'm always looking for a new isolated setting, a new isolated thriller, and would love to check out any recommendations that you might also have. But that is all for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.